Hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode of Gary Talks. The other day I received a video message from WWE Hall of Famer Badass Billy Gunn. Take a look.
Gary, what's going on? How are you? I'd probably like to know where I rank actually, but if you don't rank Tombstone as one of the best Western movies of all time, other than some John Wayne stuff, I'm just going kind of recent that people would know because people just aren't into like real cool classic movies anymore. But anyway, that's my that's my prediction on movies.
So that's what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to rank my top 10 westerns of the past 40 years, as well as talk about my favorite recent Western TV shows. And I have a very special guest lined up, Jeffrey Weissman, one of the stars of Pale Rider. So let's get right into my top 10, starting with a horror Western, Bone Tomahawk. Bone Tomahawk is a 2015 horror Western directed by S. Craig Zahler, blending the dusty atmosphere of classic Westerns with the gruesome elements of horror. The film follows Sheriff Franklin Hunt, played by Kurt Russell, and his ragtag group as they embark on a rescue mission to save townspeople abducted by a tribe of cannibalistic cave dwellers. The pacing is deliberately slow, allowing for deep character development and building of tension. The first two acts lean heavily into the Western genre, focusing on the harsh realities of frontier life. But the third act takes a sharp, unsettling turn into horror. The film does not shy away from graphic violence, and some scenes are really, really disturbing. Visually, the film captures the bleak beauty of the Western landscape, and the cast delivers strong performances. Bone Tomahawk is a unique, genre-blending experience that offers a compelling mix of grit, tension, and shock, making it a must-see for fans of Westerns and horror films alike. So if a horror Western is definitely not your typical Western film, then number 9 also isn't, because it's a sci-fi time-traveling Western film. Back to the Future, Part 3. Back to the Future Part 3, directed by Robert Zemeckis and released in 1990, wraps up the beloved time-traveling trilogy with a Western twist. After the cliffhanger ending of Part 2, Marty McFly travels back to 1885 to save Doc Brown, who's stranded in the Wild West and marked for death by the villainous Buford Mad Dog Tannen. The film cleverly blends science fiction and westerns, offering a fresh and fun change of scenery. The dynamic between Marty and Doc remains the heart of the film, with their camaraderie and banter driving much of the plot. The setting allows for some inventive time travel hijinks involving steam-powered locomotives and makeshift hoverboards, adding excitement to the storyline. Visually, the film captures the look and feel of classic westerns, complete with sweeping landscapes and period-appropriate sets. And the addition of Doc's love interest Clara adds a charming new dimension to the story. While not as groundbreaking as the original, Back to the Future Part 3 is a satisfying and entertaining conclusion to the trilogy, delivering plenty of humor, action, and heart for fans of the series. And who can forget this kid pointing at his junk? You guys probably know him as Teddy from Pale Rider, but he was also George McFly in Back to the Future 2 and 3, and you know there's no way I would ever have Jeffrey Weissman on the show and not talk about Back to the Future. Thank you so much for being on Gary Talks.
Hello, St. Louis. Don't want you to think that it hasn't gone unnoticed that you're wearing Clint Eastwood's shirt from Back to the Future Part 3.
Yeah, well, I figured it was the perfect shirt to wear because we're going to be talking about your experience with Clint Eastwood later, and your son, Marty McFly, wore this shirt when he was known as Clint Eastwood in the movie. But the first thing I really do want to know is, was there ever talk about George McFly being in 1885? Because it was always weird to me they chose Michael to play Seamus McFly, who then basically was married to his mom.
Originally, Crispin was to play Seamus.
I mean, that does make more sense. Did they ever talk to you about playing the part of Seamus McFly?
No, because if I had without the prosthetic makeups that I wore And the life mask makeups that were based on Crispin were his 17-year-old George from 1955, and straight on it didn't look right. It looked odd, but the profile looked exactly like Crispin, and that's why they kept me in the background for the recreating the shots that they needed for the Enchantment Under the Sea dance and the fight with Biff out in the parking lot. You see me often in the far distance or out of focus, what have you, but the profile is right on. The full front is not. So if they had looked at me as Seamus McFly uh, with my own face, audience probably would have gone, well, who's this? How does this person fit into all this? Because they didn't have me play George without makeup.
Yeah.
And so I remember hanging upside down doing this stuff in 2015, being told, first of all, that that was meant as torture for Crispin. And also because Crispin would often overshoot or undershoot his marks for camera. And this way, Bob Gale and Bob Zemeckis would have him controlled. They could control his marks for him to stay in focus. And while I was enduring all that, Bob Gale came up to me and said, we'll find you a role without the makeup as a cowboy or something in part 3. I was like, I'd like that. And so I was told that I would have that. I even came like a day or two later to Bob Gale and said, I'd love to play this Western Union guy at the end. And he goes,
Yeah.
well, I think that part's already, Joe, I think we have someone for that. And I was like, darn, that's a fun little bit. But I never got the call to do that. In fact, it was about a year after shooting the McFly 2015 stuff that I finally got the call to do the little bit at the end when Clint comes back and he comes to the family and they're looking for my glasses. Lorraine, have you seen my glasses? And it was disappointing that I didn't get a cowboy role, but I still love the film.
Well, it is my favorite trilogy of all time. We'll be back in just a little bit to hear stories from Jeffrey Weissman as he talks about playing the role of Teddy in Pale Rider and what it was like working with the real Clint Eastwood. My picks aren't exactly your average typical Western. I enjoy things that are a bit different, and number 8 follows that trend. Yes, it's your maybe typical Western story, but it's shot by a guy who is not your typical Western director. That director is Sam Raimi, and the film is The Quick and the Dead. The Quick and the Dead, directed by one of my all-time favorite directors, Sam Raimi, was released in 1995 and is a stylish and action-packed Western that brings a fresh twist to the genre. The film centers around a high-stakes gunfighting competition in the town of Redemption, drawing a colorful array of gunslingers, each with their own motives and backstories. And the cast is freaking insane. Sharon Stone stars as Ellen, a mysterious and tough-as-nails gunslinger seeking revenge, while Gene Hackman delivers a menacing performance as the ruthless town boss, Herod. The supporting cast includes a young Leonardo DiCaprio as the Kid, a brash and ambitious shooter, and Russell Crowe as Court, a reformed outlaw turned preacher. Raimi's direction is energetic and inventive, using his signature dynamic camera work and dramatic zooms to create a sense of intensity and excitement. The film's visual style, with its over-the-top shootouts and stylized violence, pays homage to classic westerns while infusing a modern, almost comic book-like sensibility. The Quick and the Dead may not take itself too seriously, but its blend of charisma, action, and visual flair makes for an entertaining ride. Number 7 is the only remake on the list, but what a remake it is. 3:10 to Yuma. 3:10 to Yuma, the 2007 remake directed by James Mangold, is a gripping and intense western that pays homage to the 1957 original while also being its own take on the story. The film stars Christian Bale as Dan Evans, a struggling rancher who agrees to escort the notorious outlaw Ben Wade, played by Russell Crowe, to a train that will take him to prison. The tension between the two leads is the film's core strength. Bale portrays Evans with a gritty determination, embodying a man driven by desperation and a sense of honor. Crowe's Ben Wade is charismatic and complex, blending charm with menace, making him both a formidable adversary and an intriguing character. 3:10 to Yuma balances action with character development, delivering a compelling narrative about honor, redemption, and the blurred lines between good and evil. Number 6 is the first appearance of a film by Clint Eastwood, but it won't be the last. Pale Rider. 1985's Pale Rider is Clint Eastwood's haunting return to the Western genre. Eastwood stars as a mysterious, almost supernatural figure known only as the Preacher. He arrives in a small mining town oppressed by a ruthless tycoon and his gang, delivering hope and vengeance to the struggling miners. At its core, Pale Rider is a meditation on justice and redemption. The Preacher is a classic Western figure, the lone gunslinger with a murky past. But Eastwood elevates this familiar character by imbuing him with an almost supernatural presence. The film often hints at the notion that the Preacher might be a ghost or an avenging angel, lending an otherworldly feel to the narrative. While the pacing may feel slow for modern audiences accustomed to faster, more action-packed westerns, Pale Rider rewards those who appreciate atmosphere, nuance, and classic western storytelling. It's not just a tale of revenge, it's a spiritual journey wrapped in the dusty, unforgiving world of the Old West. We are joined again by my special guest, Jeffrey Weissman, who played Teddy in Pale Rider. And the very first thing I have to say is, Teddy, why did you go to town? You know nothing good happens in town. I mean, it was basically your first line in the movie, don't go to town.
Yeah, after what happened last time, I played Teddy kind of as not a half-wit, but more of a quarter-wit, suspenders and a belt.
So how did you come up with all that? And I mean, really, how did you come up with the character of Teddy?
I just dove in. I love figuring out details that will support a character and based on what was in the script, and we are kind of dumb. So we're going to town and we get to go to Blankenships and eat candy. They're kind of grown kids.
How did you end up being cast in this role in Pale Rider?
What happened was that Chris Penn, Sean Penn's little brother, very talented actor, met Clint at a party in Malibu and said, I want to do a movie with you. I want to do a Western, And Clint, it took him apparently better part of 10 years, one of the writers told me, to get Clint to do this Western, his return to Westerns. Clint sent Chris Pale Rider and offered him Eddie Conway. And Chris kind of threw it back and said, I don't want to play a good guy. I want to play a bad guy. And so they moved Chris over to LaHood's son and moved Chuck LaFont, who was Teddy originally, into Eddie. And so Teddy became available. And that's how that came to pass, that I got the opportunity to go and audition. And I thinking, I want to do a Western with Clint Eastwood, of course. And gosh, that was like on a Thursday, I think. And on Friday, I was going for a fitting and getting on an airplane. So it happened very quickly.
So then when you get to set, what's it like the first time you get to meet Clint Eastwood?
My scene was set to shoot. And I remember Clint walking off towards the woods, kind of walking through, scouting out what his next shot was going to be. And I followed him. And even though he's directing, he's still dressed as Preacher in his duster and hat and all. And I'm following Clint like a stalker. He turns and says, yeah. I go, Mr. Eastwood, we haven't met yet. My name is Jeffrey Weissman. I'm playing Teddy, blah, blah. He goes, I know who you are. Who do you think cast you? And I was like, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
He exudes a bit of a intimidating vibe.
There are lots of stories that Clint Eastwood is always under budget and ahead of schedule. How does that affect his directing style?
He's a very easygoing, he's an actor's director in that he doesn't sort of build tension on the set just by being in control, but rather he learned, I believe, from Don Siegel, who directed one or two of the Dirty Harry films, who probably learned from John Ford, who directed Westerns, to not say action. An actor, usually when they hear action, tenses up and gets self-conscious. I know I'm acting now. If Clint likes to say, whenever you're ready, or begin when you're, which is really wonderful. And he also shoots the rehearsals. Quite a few of the scenes that you see in Pale Rider were rehearsals.
Oh, wow.
The biggest example of that is when Spider gets shot, and the boys finally make it over from the mercantile to Daddy's dead body. We had to use oil-based snow. And Chuck, playing Eddie, went to where we had discussed where Teddy was going to go. So I had to kind of shift my weight and go a different direction at the last second. And I go to Spider's head, slipping on the oil-based snow. So I remember my boot actually not kicking Doug in the head, but catching his hair. I almost kicked him in the head. And then I was where Eddie should have been, crying over Daddy's dead body and reacting to Stockburn saying, tell the preacher to come to town. Clint called cut. He said, let's move on, which means we weren't going to actually do a take. That was rehearsal. That's what he was going to keep. And it was the only time I really got into Clint's face. I said, Clint, Chuck didn't hit his mark. I had to go to his mark. I almost kicked Doug in the head. I slipped, blah, 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 and he thought about it and thought about it. And he said, no, we're just going to cut from your face, which meant I had the close up. I was like, I'm not going to argue anymore.
Yeah, I'll allow that. So I do have to ask you, what were your thoughts on the character of the preacher? I mean, was he a ghost? Was he someone that Stockburn had actually killed in the past and now he's back from the grave? Or was he just a man that Stockburn thought he had killed, but he really wasn't dead, kind of like his character in Hang 'em High?
He appears out of the mist in the snow. When he takes his shirt off in that low-lit scene inside the cabin, you see all the scars around his heart where the bullet holes hit. So obviously he had died. And that he was an apparition or a manifestation, that spirit, that avenging angel. There was also the biblical references when Sydney's praying over her dog, and Sydney's character, remembering her name. What's her name? Anyway, her prayers are answered by this avenging angel. And because it's more of an allegory than a, out and out factual type Western recreation of a story, it had some flaws. I remember kind of being frustrated that people didn't get that he was a ghost, because either Clint was too subtle with that, or it was also confusing.
I mean, I always thought it was fairly clear because in that scene where we see the bullet holes in the preacher's back, it basically mirrors the exact same bullet holes we see in Stockburn's back after the preacher kills him. So it's just sort of like there is no way that a person could survive those gunshots. So obviously he was the avenging ghost back from the dead. But I'd really like to thank you for being on Gary Talks today, for talking about Pale Rider as well as Back to the Future. It's been awesome having you on the show.
I just appreciate you having me on. And if anyone wants an autographed picture from Pale Rider or Back to the Future 2 or 3, go to jeffreyweissman.com.
People should definitely check that out, and I'll talk to you soon. Kevin Costner is often associated with Westerns. I mean, he has this new 3-part giant epic coming out called Horizon, and he's had some great Westerns. He's won Oscars for Westerns. But to me, the greatest one he ever did comes in at number 5 on my list, Open Range. Open Range, directed by and starring Kevin Costner alongside Robert Duvall, is a 2003 Western that revives the classic themes of loyalty, justice, and the rugged beauty of the American frontier. The film follows 2 free-grazing cattlemen as they try to live a peaceful life on the open range. Their quiet existence is disrupted when they cross paths with a corrupt land baron, played by Michael Gambon, who wants to drive them off the land. The chemistry between Costner and Duvall is the film's heart, with Duvall delivering a stand-up performance as the wise and stoic boss, and Costner as the brooding Charlie, a man haunted by his violent past. Their camaraderie and the bond they share with their crew add depth to the story. Visually, Open Range is breathtaking, with sweeping shots of wide-open landscapes and stunning cinematography that captures the grandeur and isolation of the West. The film's pacing is deliberate, taking its time to build tension and develop the characters. When the action does come, it's explosive and realistic, culminating in one of the most intense and well-crafted shootouts in modern Westerns. Open Range is a powerful and authentic Western that respects the genre's roots while delivering a timeless story of friendship, justice, and redemption. Number 4 is the most quotable Western on my list. Now, some of you will be like, wait, you have Tombstone at number 4? But this is actually a movie that I quote more than Tombstone. That movie is Young Guns. While Young Guns might not be my all-time favorite Western, I think it's the most fun of any film on this list. Directed by Christopher Kane and released in 1988, Young Guns is a lively and energetic Western that brings a youthful, rebellious twist to the story of Billy the Kid and the Lincoln County War. The film stars Emilio Estevez as the infamous outlaw Billy the Kid, leading a group of young gunslingers including Kiefer Sutherland, Lou Diamond Phillips, Dermot Mulroney, and Casey Sizemasco, who seek revenge after their mentor is murdered. Estevez's portrayal of Billy is charismatic and unpredictable, capturing the outlaw's notorious wild spirit. While the historical accuracy is loose, the movie excels in delivering pure entertainment, offering a fresh perspective with its focus on a younger generation of outlaws. I told you there'd be another Clint Eastwood movie on the list, and it comes in at number 3, possibly his greatest Western, Unforgiven. The film follows retired gunslinger William Money, who is drawn back into the life of violence when a young cowboy, the Schofield Kid, convinces him to take on one last job, avenging a brutally assaulted prostitute. Eastwood delivers a powerful performance as a character torn between his violent past and his attempt to live a peaceful, moral life. Morgan Freeman co-stars as his old partner Ned Logan, bringing a depth and warmth to the role, while Gene Hackman shines as the ruthless lawman Little Bill Daggett, whose sense of justice is as brutal as the outlaws he hunts. Unforgiven is a gritty, uncompromising Western that challenges the genre's romanticized view of violence. It's a masterful piece of filmmaking, offering a raw and realistic portrayal of the Old West, and is widely regarded as one of the greatest Westerns ever made. I know this will disappoint badass Billy Gunn, but my number 2 favorite Western of the past 40 years is Tombstone. Tombstone, directed by George P. Cosmatos, or rumored to really have been directed by Kurt Russell, was released in 1993, and it's a thrilling and action-packed Western that dramatizes the legendary gunfight at the OK Corral and its aftermath. The film features an ensemble cast led by Russell as the stoic and determined Wyatt Earp, and Val Kilmer in a stand-up performance as the charismatic and unpredictable Doc Holliday. Set in the town of Tombstone, Arizona, the story follows the Earp brothers, Wyatt, Virgil, and Morgan, as they try to live peacefully, but are drawn into a violent confrontation with a gang of outlaws known as the Cowboys, led by the menacing Curly Bill and Johnny Ringo. The chemistry among the cast elevates the film, adding emotional weight to the high-stakes gunfights. The film balances intense action scenes with moments of humor and friendship, making it a well-rounded and entertaining experience. Tombstone is a classic Western that combines historical drama with Hollywood flair, offering great performances, quotable dialogue, and some of the most exciting gunfights ever filmed. So what beats Tombstone? Well, anyone that knows me knows how much I love Quentin Tarantino, and this could be his greatest movie, my favorite Western of not only the past 40 years, but of all time, Django Unchained. Django Unchained, directed by Quentin Tarantino and released in 2012, is a bold and provocative Western that combines Tarantino's signature style with a powerful exploration of slavery and revenge. The film stars Jamie Foxx as Django, a freed slave who teams up with a German bounty hunter and one of my all-time favorite movie characters, Dr. King Schultz, played by Christoph Waltz, to rescue his wife Broomhilda from a ruthless plantation owner, played by Leonardo DiCaprio. Of course, the movie is stolen by Samuel L. Jackson as Stephen, the slave who actually runs everything on the plantation. Tarantino's direction is characteristically sharp and stylish, with a mix of dark humor, explosive action, and his trademark dialogue. It's a thrilling ride that's as entertaining as it is thought-provoking, making it my favorite Western of the past 40 years. While we've mainly been focused on movie Westerns, there have been some really good ones released in the past 40 years on television. Western TV shows have been a cornerstone of American television, reflecting the country's fascination with frontier life and law and order. Their history is as rich and varied as the landscapes they portray, evolving significantly over the decades. What started as radio shows quickly moved into early TV programs like The Lone Ranger and Hopalong Cassidy. In the 60s and 70s, westerns really took off. There were a ton of shows on TV, huge shows like Rawhide, Bonanza, and Gunsmoke. But then in the 80s, westerns on TV seemed to die off. I mean, I guess you could call Little House on the Prairie a western. It was western-ish. While Lonesome Dove in 1989 started to revive people's passion for TV westerns, it was Deadwood, which I consider the greatest western TV show of all time in the early 2000s, that made westerns cool again. And now we get everything from the western portions of Westworld to Hell on Wheels to 1883. Today, western TV shows continue to evolve, incorporating modern sensibilities and narratives while paying homage to the genre's roots. The western remains a versatile and enduring genre, adapting to changing times and tastes, while continuing to captivate audiences with its timeless themes of heroism, justice, and adventure. Now you guys might be asking yourself, why should we listen to Gary's opinion on westerns? Sure, we trust him on pro wrestling or hair metal or comic books, but what does he know about westerns? You may be surprised to know that one time I made a western. Back in 2010, one of my frequent collaborators, Randy Manning, came to me with a short film idea he had, and we co-wrote To Kill a Cowboy, which he then starred in and I directed. Let me tell you that of all the genres of movies, I believe that westerns are the hardest to direct, as you are dealing with horses, guns, the weather, mosquitoes, and the knowledge that if something goes wrong, someone can get really hurt. While the film turned out great and it played all over the world at film festivals, I think I scratched that itch, and I don't think I'll ever try to direct another western. Talking about TV and movies is much, much easier. Well, that's all the time we have for this week. As always, check out GaryTalks.tv. I've got past versions of the show, audio podcasts, things like that. Plus, it's the best way to get in touch with me. Let me know how mad you are that Tombstone didn't come in at number 1. And I'd like to thank my guest, Jeffrey Weissman, for being on the show today, as well as Badass Billy Gunn for suggesting this topic. And be sure and join me next week as we celebrate the release of the newest Marvel TV show, Agatha All Along, by taking a look at the history of Marvel in TV shows. And I have a lot of special guests from Agatha All Along: Aubrey Plaza, Joe Locke, and legend Patti LuPone. See you next week.
From capes to tapes, Gary's on the case. He's breaking down each scene, every place. On Gary Talks, he's quick with his peculiar wits. From plot twists to the comic strips, Gary's flipping sick.